The low hum of the Sovereign Talon's quantum drive resonated through the troop compartment, a subtle vibration that seemed to match the nervous energy of the assembled soldiers. Sergeant Marcus Reyes sat wedged between Kroll, a massive reptilian heavy gunner, and Zira, a lean avian tactical specialist. Around them, 200 soldiers from 12 different species represented the most elite invasion force in the Galactic Concordance. Commander Vexera's holographic projection flickered to life, casting an ethereal blue light across the cramped compartment. Her crystalline exoskeleton reflected the light in sharp angles, betraying none of the tension that seemed to crackle in the air. "Objective is simple," she began, her translated voice carrying the hint of practiced dismissiveness. Earth. Primitive carbon-based civilization. Technology level. Pre-singularity. Estimated resistance time. 72 standard hours. Reyes watched carefully. Something felt off. To his left, Kroll was placing the substantial bet with a trio of silicon-based troops from the Orc Confederacy. 72 hours. The reptilian soldier's laugh was a deep, rumbling sound. "I give them 12. Maybe. Who wants in on this?" A scared methane breather named Frax slammed down a credit chip. 12 hours. Optimistic. I say 6. These humans won't even understand what's happening before we're done. The casual dismissal made Reyes uncomfortable. He'd learned early in his career that underestimation was the first step toward catastrophic failure. At the far end of the compartment, an old soldier named Grek, a veteran of over 50 planetary subjugations, sat unusually quiet. His 4 eyes, typically scanning every detail with predatory intensity, now seemed focused on some distant memory. When Reyes caught his gaze, Grek's mandibles clicked in a pattern that roughly translated to a warning. "Something's different about this one," Grek had muttered during equipment check just hours earlier. His translator had rendered the words with an uncharacteristic tremor. "The data doesn't match the models." Now, watching the pre-invasion briefing, Reyes understood what the old soldier meant. The planetary analysis seemed incomplete. Gaps in the intelligence report that should have been filled with detailed reconnaissance were suspiciously blank. Entire sections were marked with cryptic notations that looked more like placeholders than actual information. Commander Vexera continued her briefing. Tactical holographs displayed Earth, the blue-green sphere that looked deceptively peaceful. Invasion vectors, predicted resistance points, and estimated casualty projections populated the display. But something about the projections seemed too clean, too perfect. Primary objective. Vexera's voice cut through Reyes's thoughts. Total planetary pacification. Secondary objective. Resource extraction. Estimated mission duration. 96 hours from initial planetfall. A ripple of anticipation moved through the troops. Another easy conquest. Another primitive world to be cataloged and controlled. Reyes noticed his equipment manifest flickering oddly. The quantum-encrypted datapad seemed to hesitate, its holographic display momentarily glitching before stabilizing. A minor malfunction, perhaps, but in his experience, minor malfunctions were never truly minor. As if sensing his scrutiny, Zyra leaned close. Her feathered form rustled with a hint of static electricity. "First invasion?" she asked, her translator rendering the question with a note of amusement. "7th, Reyes responded, his voice calm. "Something feels different about this one." Zara's laugh was sharp, predatory. "They always feel different until the first wave drops. Then it's just procedure." But Reyes wasn't convinced. The old soldier Grek's words echoed in his mind. The data doesn't match the models. As the Sovereign Talon continued its approach to the Sol system, a sense of impending complexity gathered like storm clouds. 200 soldiers prepared for what they believed would be a routine planetary subjugation. None of them, not even Sergeant Marcus Reyes, could imagine the true nature of the conflict that awaited them on Earth. The first drop pods screamed through Earth's atmosphere like metallic comets, their quantum-reinforced hulls cutting through clouds with surgical precision. Sergeant Marcus Reyes gripped the stabilization bar of his drop pod, feeling the subtle vibrations that spoke of imminent planetary invasion. Targeting systems locked, came the emotionless voice of the pod's eye. Planetfall in 3, 2, 1. The impact was supposed to be routine. Soft ground, minimal resistance, clean insertion. Nothing went according to plan. Reyes' pod struck what should have been an open field, but something was wrong immediately. The ground seemed to shift, not in the way terrain normally moves, but with an almost intelligent persistence. Microsensors in his combat suit went haywire, displaying impossible readings that made no sense. Tactical Team Alpha, report. Commander Vexera's voice crackled through the communication network. Silence. Then chaos. The first squad's communication dissolved into static, punctuated by sounds that defied description, part mechanical stress, part something else entirely. Reyes watched through his pod's external sensors as the surrounding drop pods began to experience inexplicable failures. Kroll's pod, just meters away, suddenly tilted at an impossible angle. Its quantum stabilization field flickered like a dying firefly, then collapsed completely. The massive reptilian soldier's communication channel erupted in a burst of panicked clicks and translated curses. "Something's jamming our systems," a silicon-based trooper screamed. His pod's exterior began to ripple, not crack or break, but literally ripple like liquid metal responding to an unseen command. Reyes' own systems started to glitch. Targeting computers showed impossible trajectories. Weapon diagnostics fluctuated between fully operational and complete system failure. His suit's environmental controls began cycling through temperatures with dizzying speed. Arctic cold to burning heat in seconds. This wasn't standard planetary defense. This was something else entirely. Through his narrowing field of vision, Reyes caught glimpses of human defenders. They weren't cowering. They weren't running. Instead, they seemed to be studying the invasion. Small groups with what looked like improvised equipment moved with a coordination that defied their supposedly primitive technology. A human team approached Kroll's crashed pod. Instead of attacking, they seemed to be scanning it with devices that looked like they'd been cobbled together from spare parts. Their movements were precise, calculated, nothing like the panicked response of a supposedly inferior civilization. "Command, this is not a standard resistance," Reyes transmitted, keeping his voice steady. "Repeat, this is not standard resistance." Another pod exploded nearby, not from external weapons, but from internal systems failure. The methane breather Vrax tumbled out, his environmental suit partially liquefied in a pattern that suggested something had systematically broken down its molecular structure. Zyra's voice cut through the growing pandemonium. "Our technologies aren't working." It's like her transmission dissolved into a burst of static. Reyes realized they were being systematically taken apart, not by conventional weapons, but by something far more insidious. The humans were dismantling the invasion at a fundamental technological level. A human field commander, visible through Reyes' increasingly unstable visual feed, stood watching the chaos. No weapon in hand, no panic, just observation. The look in his eyes suggested this wasn't a defense. This was an experiment. As system after system failed, Reyes understood something profound. They hadn't come to conquer Earth. They had walked into a trap so sophisticated that trap seemed like too simple a word. The planetfall that was supposed to take hours was unraveling in minutes, and Earth wasn't just resisting. It was teaching them a lesson they would never forget. Hours became a nightmare of systematic deconstruction. What remained of the invasion force huddled in a makeshift defensive perimeter, their once pristine advanced technology now a graveyard of failed systems. Sergeant Marcus Reyes had long since abandoned standard communication protocols. Survival was now the only mission. The humans hadn't fired a single conventional weapon. They didn't need to. Each alien system failed in progressively more bizarre ways. Quantum communication arrays would suddenly translate random mathematical equations instead of transmitting signals. Powered armor suits developed unexpected material properties. one moment rigid, the next flowing like liquid, then crystallizing into brittle fragments. Greg, the veteran soldier, sat muttering to himself, his four eyes tracking something only he could see. Adaptation, he kept repeating. They're adapting faster than we can think. A silicon-based tactical officer named Zin approached Rise, her crystalline form flickering with barely contained panic. Our predictive models, she said, her translator rendering her words with a mechanical tremor. They mean nothing here. Rise watched a squad of human defenders in the distance. They moved with an unsettling synchronicity, using what appeared to be cobbled-together equipment that somehow interfaced perfectly with captured alien technology. It was as if they were learning, absorbing, transforming with each passing moment. One of their communication specialists, a human with a device that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and kitchen appliances, seemed to be deliberately exposing their equipment to alien systems. Not to destroy them, to understand them. They're not fighting us, Rise muttered to himself. They're studying us. A massive energy weapon, the pride of the Orc Confederacy's arsenal, suddenly transformed into a complex network of bioluminescent tendrils. The weapon's operator could only stare in horror as what was once an instrument of destruction became something entirely alien and incomprehensible. Kroll, surviving despite his earlier crash, approached with a fragment of his destroyed combat suit. Look, he said, holding up a piece of metal that seemed to be slowly changing color and texture. It's like the entire planet is learning. Zin's analysis confirmed Kroll's observation. Every piece of technology was being systematically understood, decoded, and fundamentally altered. Not destroyed. Transformed. A human research team approached one of the downed alien vehicles. Instead of weaponry, they carried what looked like an assortment of sensors, tablets, and what might have been a modified coffee maker. Their movements were deliberate, almost clinical. We're not dealing with a defense, Greg suddenly announced, his voice cutting through the growing tension. This is a comprehensive analysis. We're test subjects. Reyes understood then. This wasn't an invasion. This was an experiment on a scale beyond comprehension. Earth wasn't resisting. Earth was collecting data. As night fell, the remaining invasion force realized a terrifying truth. They were no longer the observers. They had become the observed. Something fundamental had changed, and they were only beginning to understand how completely they had been outmaneuvered. The humans hadn't fired a shot. They didn't need to. They were dismantling an entire invasion force with nothing more than curiosity and an ability to adapt that defied every known principle of technological development. Sergeant Marcus Rice looked out over the transformed landscape, understanding that whatever happened next would rewrite everything known about first contact, technological development, and the true nature of human potential. The breaking point came without warning. What remained of the invasion force had been reduced to a scattered collection of survivors, their advanced technology now little more than complex paperweights. Sergeant Marcus Rice found himself in a makeshift command center, a repurposed farm building that seemed to pulse with an intelligence far beyond its humble appearance. Greg approached, his four eyes moving in different directions, tracking something invisible to everyone else. We're not losing, he said, his translator rendering the words with a mix of terror and grudging respect. We're being processed. The farm's communication systems, clearly human-made, yet interfacing with alien technology in ways that defied comprehension, suddenly came alive. Not with a transmission, but with a complex mathematical sequence that seemed to be solving itself in real time. A human researcher, young, perhaps in her early 30s, stood at the center of the room. She wasn't holding a weapon. Instead, she manipulated a holographic interface cobbled together from what looked like a standard tablet, several mobile phones, and components salvaged from the alien's own equipment. Quantum entanglement isn't a barrier, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. It's a communication protocol. Reyes watched as the alien survivors began to change. Not physically, but in their understanding. Zin, the silicon-based tactical officer, had stopped trying to restore her communications array. Instead, she was carefully documenting the transformation, her crystalline form now etched with complex diagrams that seemed to move when no one was directly looking. Kroll approached Rise, his massive reptilian form diminished. "We thought we were coming to conquer," he said, his translator rendering the words with a mix of shame and wonder. "They're not fighting us. They're teaching us." The farm around them began to change. What had seemed like a simple agricultural building now revealed layers of complexity. Sensor networks integrated with biological systems, communication arrays hidden in the most mundane objects, a coffee maker that could potentially interface with faster-than-light communication systems. A massive energy signature began to build, not from a weapon, but from something that felt like pure information. "They're uploading," Greg said, his voice a mixture of terror and awe. "Not data. Understanding." The human researcher looked up, making direct eye contact with Reyes. In that moment, he understood something profound. This wasn't a battle. This wasn't even a first contact scenario. This was a comprehensive system upgrade. Alien technologies began to transform. The quantum communication array became a complex neural network. A plasma weapon dissolved and reformed into something that looked like a sophisticated medical diagnostic tool. Each piece of technology was being fundamentally reimagined. "Why?" Rise asked, the question escaping before he could stop himself. The human researcher smiled. "Because that's what intelligence does," she said. "It learns. It adapts. It transforms." The energy signature reached a crescendo. For a moment, reality itself seemed to bend, not break, but flex, as if the very laws of physics were being rewritten. Sergeant Marcus Reyes understood then that they had not come to conquer Earth. Earth had been waiting for them, waiting to show them something fundamental about the nature of intelligence, adaptation, and potential. The invasion was over. The real first contact was just beginning. And humanity was in control. The medical bay of the recovery station felt more like an interrogation chamber. Sergeant Marcus Reyes sat motionless, his eyes fixed on a point beyond the walls, beyond the moment. The medical staff, a mix of species from across the galactic concordance, approached with increasing frustration. Every scan, every probe, every attempt to extract information met with the same impenetrable silence. Commander Vexera stood behind the reinforced observation glass, her crystalline exoskeleton refracting the harsh medical lights. "He's the only one," she muttered, more to herself than to the assembled medical team. The only one who survived. Survived wasn't quite the right word. Returned was more accurate, but no one could explain how or why. The medical eye's diagnostic report read like a nightmare of contradictions. Reyes's biological systems showed signs of exposure to technologies that shouldn't exist. Quantum markers in his neural pathways suggested interactions with computational systems that defied current scientific understanding. His body was changed, subtly, fundamentally, in ways that made no sense. Dr. Liana Soren, a human xenobiological specialist brought in for consultation, studied the reports with a mixture of professional excitement and barely contained wonder. "It's not just information retention," she explained to the increasingly frustrated alien administrators. "It's a complete systemic integration. Whatever happened on Earth wasn't an invasion. It was a conversation." Psychological probes failed spectacularly. Advanced neural scanners designed to extract memories produced nothing but complex mathematical sequences that seemed to solve themselves. When pressed, Reyes would simply blink, a gesture that somehow felt more communicative than any verbal response. Kroll, the surviving reptilian soldier, visited once. His massive form seemed diminished, broken. "Tell them," he pleaded, his translator rendering the words with a desperate edge. "Tell them what happened." Reyes said nothing. The medical staff tried everything. Telepathic interfaces from a dozen different species, quantum memory extractors, neurological reconstruction techniques that pushed the boundaries of ethical medical practice. Nothing penetrated the wall of silence. What they didn't realize was that Reyes was choosing not to speak, not out of fear, not out of trauma, but because words were suddenly inadequate. Commander Vexera's frustration reached a breaking point. "Isolate him," she ordered. "Full quarantine protocols." But isolation was impossible. The very systems designed to contain Reyes began to change. Communication arrays would glitch when he was near. Quantum encryption keys would reset themselves. It was as if the act of trying to contain him was itself a form of communication. Dr. Soren noticed something else. The mathematical sequences generated by the failed psychological probes weren't random. They were solving themselves. Complex problems in quantum mechanics, breakthrough computational models, entirely new approaches to understanding reality. "He's not hiding information," she told the commanders. "He's waiting for us to be ready to understand it." Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Reyes remained unchanged, unbroken, silent. The only evidence of what happened came from the smallest of details, a slight change in how he moved. The way technology seemed to respond to his mere presence. The complex equations that appeared in the margins of his medical reports. Equations that, when fully examined, suggested technology centuries beyond current understanding. Something had happened on Earth. Something fundamental had changed. And Marcus Reyes was the living proof. A single soldier who carried an entire transformation within his silence. The interrogation chamber was a masterpiece of technological desperation. Sergeant Marcus Reyes sat perfectly still, surrounded by the most advanced psychological extraction technologies in the known galaxy. 12 different species had contributed their most sophisticated mind-probing techniques. The room itself was a testament to invasive interrogation. Quantum resonance fields, telepathic dampeners, neural interface projectors that could theoretically extract memories from the deepest recesses of consciousness. Commander Vexera watched from behind the adaptive glass observation panel, her crystalline form reflecting the harsh interrogation lights. "Break him," she had ordered. The implications were clear, by any means necessary. Dr. Lyanna Soren stood to one side, her human presence a stark contrast to the alien technologies surrounding Reyes. She understood something the others did not, that this wasn't a typical interrogation. This was a negotiation of understanding. The first probe began. A Zalaxian neural extractor, a device capable of parsing memories at the quantum level, activated with a soft, almost musical hum. The room filled with a complex lattice of energy fields, each designed to penetrate the most guarded consciousness. Nothing happened. The lead interrogator, a methane-breathing specialist named Vrax, adjusted the settings. His translator clicked with frustration. "Increase quantum resonance by 0.03%. Activate empathic penetration protocols." Reyes blinked. Just a blink. But somehow, the entire room's technology hiccuped. Quantum arrays reset. Communication systems flickered. For a millisecond, every piece of technology in the room seemed to pause, as if taking a collective breath. "Impossible," Vrax muttered. Dr. Soren leaned forward. "He's not resisting," she said softly. "He's communicating." The next probe was more invasive. A crystalline neural network designed to map consciousness at its most fundamental level began to interface with Reyes. The room filled with holographic representations of neural pathways. Complex, shifting, impossible to comprehend. But instead of revealing memories, the holographs began to solve themselves. Mathematical equations appeared, rearranged, solved themselves, then transformed into entirely new computational models. It was as if the act of trying to extract information was itself producing new information. Commander Vexera's patience broke. "Activate full-spectrum memory reconstruction," she ordered. The room transformed. Reality itself seemed to bend. Memories weren't just being extracted. They were being reconstructed, reinterpreted, transformed. Reyes remained perfectly still. But something was happening. The interrogators began to change. Vrax's methane-breathing apparatus started to recalibrate itself. The Zylaxian neural extractor began producing computational models that suggested entirely new approaches to quantum mechanics. Dr. Soren realized the truth first. "We're not interrogating him," she said, her voice a mixture of wonder and terror. "He's interrogating us." Each attempt to extract information became a lesson. Each probe a transformation. The interrogation chamber was no longer a place of extraction. It had become a classroom. Hours passed. Days. The galactic experts brought in grew increasingly frustrated, then terrified, then something else entirely. Fascinated. Reyes never spoke a word. He didn't need to. The silence was the message. And with each passing moment, those trying to break him were the ones being fundamentally changed. Commander Vexera watched as another team of experts emerged from the interrogation chamber, their understanding of reality subtly, irrevocably altered. Something profound was happening, and Marcus Reyes was at the center of it all. Not a prisoner, not a witness, a translator. The revelation came not with a thunderous declaration, but with a quiet shift in understanding that rippled across multiple civilizations. Dr. Lyanna Soren stood before the Galactic Concordance Council, her presentation unlike any diplomatic address in recorded history. Behind her, a holographic display showed fragments of data that seemed to defy fundamental laws of physics, communication, and understanding. "What happened on Earth," she began, "was not an invasion. It was an invitation." The council chamber, representing 12 different species, each with technology centuries beyond human capability, fell absolutely silent. The data spoke for itself. Mathematical sequences that solved themselves. Technological adaptations that suggested an entirely new approach to information and existence. And at the center of it all, Sergeant Marcus Reyes, the single soldier who had become something more than a survivor. Commander Vexera, her crystalline form now showing microscopic fractures of understanding, spoke first. "Explain." Dr. Soren's presentation revealed a staggering truth. The human response to the invasion wasn't a defense. It was a comprehensive system of communication, so advanced that it appeared destructive to those who couldn't comprehend it. "They didn't fight our invasion," she explained. "They studied us, completely, utterly, in a way that transformed both the invaders and the invaded." Fragments of recovered technology told an impossible story. Alien communication arrays that had been completely dismantled were now functioning as advanced computational networks. Weapon systems had transformed into medical diagnostic tools. Every piece of technology brought to Earth had been comprehensively understood, reimagined, elevated. The Zylaxian representative, its methane-based form shifting with agitation, demanded specifics. How? The answer was both simple and incomprehensible. Humanity had treated the invasion as a comprehensive learning experience, not as a threat to be destroyed, but as information to be understood. Every technological system, every piece of alien equipment, had been approached with a level of curiosity and adaptability that defied traditional concepts of warfare or defense. "They didn't just resist," Dr. Soren said, her voice carrying a mixture of scientific precision and something else. Wonder. They evolved the very concept of resistance. Recovered communication logs showed something even more profound. The humans hadn't just adapted alien technology. They had engaged with it on a fundamental level that suggested communication was happening at a quantum informational level beyond traditional understanding. Sergeant Reyes became the living evidence of this transformation. His very presence continued to change technologies around him. Quantum encryption keys would reset. Communication systems would recalibrate. It was as if he carried the essence of that planetary transformation within him. The council members began to understand the true magnitude of what had happened. This wasn't a military victory. This was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. "They didn't want to defeat us," the Orc Confederacy representative muttered, more to himself than to the council. "They wanted to teach us." Dr. Soren's final slides showed the true depth of the transformation. Entire technological paradigms were being rewritten. communication systems that could interface across previously impossible barriers, computational models that suggested entirely new approaches to understanding reality. And at the center of it all, a single soldier who had become something more than a witness, a translator, a bridge, the first true evidence of what humanity could become. The Galactic Concordance Council sat in stunned silence. Everything they understood about first contact, about technological development, about the nature of intelligence itself had just been fundamentally challenged. Earth hadn't just survived an invasion. It had extended an invitation to something greater. 5 years after the invasion, the universe was a fundamentally different place. Sergeant Marcus Reyes stood on the observation deck of the Concordance research vessel Horizon, watching the stars. He no longer wore a military uniform. Instead, a simple adaptive garment shifted colors and textures almost imperceptibly, a testament to the technologies that had been transformed during that singular moment of first contact. Around him, representatives from 12 different galactic civilizations worked together in ways that would have been impossible before Earth's invitation. Dr. Liana Soren approached, her steps deliberate. "They're ready," she said simply. Reyes nodded. No words were necessary. The transformation had been total and profound. What began as an invasion had become humanity's most significant diplomatic achievement. Not through weapons, not through traditional communication, but through a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. Entire technological paradigms had been rewritten. Communication systems that once seemed impossible now connected civilizations across previously insurmountable barriers. The Galactic Concordance, once a loose alliance of suspicious powers, had become something closer to a collaborative network of evolving intelligences. The recovered alien technologies from the invasion had become the foundation of a new approach to understanding. Research stations across multiple star systems now operated on principles that seemed to blur the lines between technological systems and living intelligence. Every piece of equipment, every communication network, carried the subtle imprint of that moment on Earth. Kroll, the surviving reptilian soldier who had been part of the initial invasion, now worked as a cultural liaison. His perspective had been completely transformed. "We didn't understand," he often said. "We thought conquest was about destruction. Humanity showed us it's about connection." The holographic display in the observation deck came alive, not with a traditional communication, but with a complex mathematical sequence that seemed to solve itself in real time. Information that was simultaneously a message, a solution, and an invitation. Dr. Soren watched Reyes carefully. He was more than a survivor now, more than a soldier. He had become something else entirely, a living bridge between what was and what could be. "How do you feel?" she asked. It was a question she had asked many times before. Reyes turned, his eyes reflecting something beyond human or alien comprehension. The subtle quantum markers in his neural pathways continued to generate computational models that pushed the boundaries of known science. "Ready," he said. The single word carried more meaning than entire libraries of diplomatic records. The Horizon moved through space, a living testament to a transformation that had begun with a simple, unexpected response to an invasion. Humanity had not conquered. They had elevated. They had shown that true intelligence was not about resistance, but about understanding, about connection. As the ship approached a new star system, the communication systems began to pulse, not with a traditional signal, but with a complex invitation, an echo of that moment on Earth when everything changed. The universe was listening, and humanity was speaking a language beyond words.